World War I devastated all of the countries involved, and Germany joined in the suffering after the war. Everyone had experienced horrendous casualties, and many large cities in Europe were ruined. Ironically, the decisions following the war to end all wars would be the cause of the Second World War. In 1919, the leaders of Britain, France, and the United States, called the Big Three, met in France to hammer out the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. President Wilson wanted to incorporate his 14 points plan in dealing with the aftermath of the war, which didn't punish the defeated Germans too harshly. France, embarrassed by the failure of the French army to defend the homeland, wanted Germany to pay severely for the damages she inflicted. British Prime Minister Lloyd George agreed with Wilson, but he knew if he openly supported Wilson, he would be voted out of office, so he ultimately sided with France. Germany was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles on June 28, 1919. 414 of the 440 clauses of the treaty dealt with the punishment of Germany. First, Germany had to admit to causing the war and pay $33 billion in reparations for the damages they caused, a debt they could not hope to pay off. They were further humiliated by being forced to reduce their army to 100,000 men with no tanks, their navy to 6 ships with no U-boats and no air force at all. In addition, many German lands were divided up and redistributed between Denmark, Poland, Belgium, and Czechoslovakia. This weakened the German economy considerably and caused unemployment and inflation. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party seized the opportunity and began to gain popularity as he promised to rebuild and restore the defeated, humiliated, and struggling nation to its former glory. By January 1933, the Nazi Party represented the majority of the German parliament, called the Reichstag. Hitler became the leader and immediately set out to silence his opposition, suspend civil liberties, and become dictator. Hitler promoted fascism and a totalitarian government. The textbook describes fascism as a philosophy that places the importance of a nation above the value of the individual, and totalitarian governments as those that controlled every aspect of life. With these ideals, he possessed total control of the country and proceeded to rule the nation with an iron fist. He used any means necessary to gain total control and made his adversaries too afraid to oppose him. Hitler planned to strengthen the military and expand Germany's borders in order to restore pride to the German people. He also planned to punish the Jews, who he blamed for Germany's defeat in World War I. Like the U.S. during the Depression, the conversion of German industries into war manufacturing plants helped to bolster the stagnant economy. The economy improved, the military grew, and Hitler was poised to begin his campaign. The U.S. first moved from isolationism to internationalism because of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The U.S. was going to remain neutral, but the attack forced them to be involved in World War II. At first, U.S. citizens and the government did not want to help the Allies in the war. They felt that World War I was a waste. According to Bruce Bartlett, author of The Politics of Pearl Harbor, at the start of the war, 95% of the population said no to war. But after the attack on Pearl Harbor, only 6 to 8% still objected to the U.S. joining the war. The U.S. remained neutral at first, but to secure U.S. borders, Congress passed the Lend-Lease Act. This authorized the President to aid any nation whose defense was vital to American security. The reason Japan attacked Pearl Harbor was to help them gain control of more territory. Secret messages were intercepted a week before the attack, but it took interpreters too long to translate it, and it was too late. In August of 1941, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt secretly met to agree on the war's goals. The Allies' goals were to make and maintain a peace that will afford all nations the means of dwelling in safety inside their own boundaries. During the war, the United States' culture and economy changed dramatically. War Production Board was in charge of handing industry over to wartime production for consumer goods. An example of conversion of industry during wartime was shirt factories, which made mosquito netting, and typewriter plants, which made machine guns. Coca-Cola made a smart business move during World War II. They sold Coke for 5 cents to soldiers and built a large base of consumers. Texas during World War II changed by the number of people who paid income taxes went from 13 to 15 million, and they also began holding income taxes from paychecks, called pay-as-you-go. Some of the richest were paying 94% of their income to taxes. Office of Price Administration helped to keep inflation from taking over due to scarcity. According to the history book, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson believed that if you are going to try and go to war or to prepare for war in a capitalist country, you have to let businesses make money during the process. By 1943, unemployment had taken a dramatic decrease. While financing the war, federal spending increased from $9.4 billion in 1939 to $95.2 billion in 1945. The gross national product, or the GNP, more than doubled in that time. The Treasury Department launched bond drives to encourage Americans to buy war bonds. War bonds are government savings bonds that finance the war. Wildcat strikes were strikes not endorsed by a union. During the war, unions generally agreed not to strike.
When the soldiers were allowed to come home, it began a time called the baby boomer period. The optimism of the economy rebounding and the war being over caused an increase of birth rate, nearly double the rate of population growth compared to the 30s. To recruit female workers, a fictional young woman was used in advertising named Rosie the Riveter. She's very patriotic, and you can still find her image today in commercials and also on billboards. African Americans were continually discriminated against. Government agencies set up to help workers honor whites only, requests that were segregated in the military. The country was protected by the African Americans, but yet they were not protected by the country. The Executive Order 9066 was signed by FDR on February 19, 1942, and moved German, Italian, and especially Japanese citizens off the coast into internment camps and remote areas inland. The families had to leave on short notice and had to leave most of their possessions behind. In 1944, the court case Korematsu v. United States ruled that executive order was not based on race. However, 40 years later, the United States government gave internees $20,000 in an official apology. The new pocketbook companies founded by Robert DeGraff in 1939 developed a market for small-sized paperback books. DeGraff believed that more Americans would read books if they were less expensive, more widely available, and easy to carry. About 60% of the populations also went to movies every week. A popular movie during wartime is called Why We Fight. Even though 4,000 out of the 5,700 major and minor league baseball players were in the military, the Americans still supported them and went to the games. In 1943, Philip Wrigley founded the All-American Girls Softball League. This became known as the All-American Girls Baseball League in 1945. Many songs during World War II encouraged hope and patriotism. Some popular songs around this time are I'll Be Seeing You and You'd Be Nice to Come Home To.